Are you serious?
The Navy, the Air Force has golf courses.
We're a victim of our own.
Right.
All right.
George Grace will well give you great
That's Charlie. It's time to remind you to turn off all cell phones, pagers, bureau phones, camera speakers, anything else that would interfere with the audio portion of the briefing.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Yes, Iran is largely predominantly Shia. Yeah.
Another one of those kind of reports.
Yeah.
Always $6 million.
I don't know that it's but they're definitely in the minority. And that has to do with they're remnants. Sunni. Yeah, the Sunnis were the inheritors of the throw the colonials out and stuff.
Just for your information, folks, this will just be General Casey today. Just General Casey.
Boy, he's largely hiding.
He's getting the party ready.
I didn't say that. He's getting ready. Did you go upstairs? The Navy? Not yet. Wonderful. That shrimp was good. Shrimp.
They do have a lot of things on
So what do you think you moved? Yeah, well, so we close on that day. We're moving from one suburb to another. We live in Charlotte, tired of commuting across the district. We got a real nice house, but the schools aren't that great. We weren't thinking about school when we got the place.
That's one live shot.
Keep saying that, it'll still be within a year.
To start like going to the dry cleaners more briefings. Come to the correct. It's all that I had that went with the gray shirt that I haven't worn this week already. My third gray shirt of the week.
Life in the symbol.
No, I decided to save money and not go to the dry cleaner. So you can.
I'm sure it works for you. So they told me it has to do with
It was very I mean, I drew it myself. Because I was like, totally playing into it.
oh, I think cover still strange and my Marie that my Marie and then somebody said very sound because you know so far I think a lot
Sorry, I'll keep running. Well, first of all, baseball, why always baseball walk through and say, you will have this done this way? I mean, that's egregious. That's like, that part, that's, you know, baseball, they do that in every, it's amazing, every city, they go, that dictates the time and how it's like the time.
Roll with an iron.
Have another beer.
No,
Well, I think you need, public financing and stuff. Because the public does hold some kind of, the state does hold some kind of responsibility. They're gonna bring a team in and saying you need to have some kind of.
Why does it look that way? I don't understand that.
Some tax, money does it. You know, the whole,
Yeah, isn't that right?
Yeah, it's a lot of tourists. But I thought I read
It may be the case.
Yeah.
Never seen a trip with Martha.
Oh, really? Nice.
Once in a while you get a
They did, they tore down for a parking lot.
that's Texas. That there's Texas policy.
From Monterey,
So there's not a crossfire.
Hello, everybody.
I think I'm self-introducing. Nice to see you back in Washington here. For those of you I don't know, I'm George Casey, the commander of the multinational force in Iraq. I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about the situation on the ground in Iraq. I've been there almost 6 months now, and we just completed a review of the first 5 months. As I think some of you know, we developed a campaign plan in the July time period. John Negroponte and I, with both the embassy staff and my staff, and we've been working toward that ever since. And so we did our first major assessment here at the 5-month point. I can tell you that I feel that we're broadly on track in helping the Iraqi people complete their transition to a constitutionally elected government at the end of next year. We also believe that this objective is both realistic and achievable. Now, I recognize that may not be an impression that we all share here, and I by no means want to give you the impression that this process is going to be uncontested or violence-free. That's not going to be the case. But as we have seen in Najaf, in Tal Afar, in Samarra, and in Sadr City, the Iraqi people are fighting to throw off the mantle of terror and intimidation so that they can elect their own government and build a better life for the Iraqi people. There is progress across Iraq every day. And every day, we and our Iraqi partners are a step closer to accomplishing our objectives. Now, let me just make a couple of points with you. First of all, the insurgency that we're fighting is not 10 feet tall. They're a tough, aggressive enemy, but they're not 10 feet tall. They're the same people who've repressed the Iraqi people for the last 30 years. They're the reason that over 1 million Iraqis are missing, and why probably several 100,000 of those missing Iraqis are likely in mass graves around Iraq. They're focused on their return to dominance so that they can continue to plunder the great natural resources of Iraq. They offer no alternative vision. They offer only intimidation and subjugation. With the win in Fallujah, with the liberation of Fallujah, they no longer have any safe havens anywhere in Iraq. And also, as a result of the success in Fallujah, it was driven home to them that they cannot defeat the coalition forces. So they're attacking our will and the will of the Iraqi people. And I personally do not believe that they will defeat the indomitable spirit of 25 million free people who want to build a better life for themselves and for their families. Second point, the Iraqi security forces are getting stronger every day. Our plan to build the Iraqi military and police forces is broadly on track. By February, there'll be 70 trained and equipped battalions in the Iraqi army. One of those will be a mechanized infantry battalion. Progress has also been made in the police and the special police forces. By February, there'll be 6 public order battalions, a special police regiment, 4 police commando battalions, and some 9 regional SWAT teams, special weapons and tactics teams, all of them contributing to the fight against the insurgents and the terrorists on a day-to-day basis. As most of you know, we still have a way to go in this area, but as I said, we're broadly on track and generally very pleased with the performance of the Iraqi security forces. Third point, reconstruction momentum is building. In June, there were only around 230 projects actually, what we call turning dirt, actually started on the ground. By the end of November, there were over 1,000 with a value of over $3 billion. All of this in spite of insurgents' efforts to disrupt the reconstruction process. This is a great tribute to the folks that work on those projects, particularly in the embassy and the coalition businessmen and women who are over there working to build a better Iraq. Fourth point, the interim government and their security forces are broadly accepted by the Iraqi people. Some poll ratings for the government are as high as 70% approval rating. The Iraqi people will express a generally favorable opinion about their new army and about their police. And more than 60% of Iraqis believe that the country is headed in the right direction, and they are optimistic about their future. We're also broadly on track for the elections. 14 of the 18 provinces have less than four or less incidents of violence a day, and the registration process in most of the country was executed. The Iraqi Election Committee is working on some alternative solutions for the 2 areas of the country that it was in which it was disrupted. I want to be clear. The insurgents and the terrorists will continue to attack and attempt to disrupt the election process, and we see that daily. They won't succeed. And the elections in January will then be but another step forward in our relentless progress toward a new Iraq. Now, if I could just say a word to the home audience here in the United States. As a nation, you can take great pride in the role that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are playing in helping build a better Iraq. Each and every one of them recognizes the importance that successfully accomplishing this mission holds for our own security. And each and every one of them makes a difference every day. Wherever I go, I see their acts of bravery, compassion, and selflessness, and I couldn't be prouder of these wonderful men and women. Our success to date is also a tribute to the great men and women of the Iraqi security forces and the coalition who have given their lives to defeat terrorism and to help build a new Iraq. We grieve with the loved ones of all our service members and with those of Iraqi service members who have died. We are humbled by their sacrifice and their contribution in bringing freedom to Iraq, and we are humbled by their sacrifice in enhancing the security of the United States and the coalition. Lastly, we are, especially during the holiday season, also deeply thankful for the love and support of our families and loved ones, whose sacrifices and strength underpin everything that we do. Progress toward a constitutionally elected government will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But the challenge of helping the people of Iraq build a better future is one that the Iraqi people and the armed forces of 30 freedom-loving countries can take on. So, thank you very much, and I'll take your questions.
General, based at least partly on the Canada Shield offering, are you concerned on what influence Iran may have over the Iraqi government after the January
I
election.
missed the very first part of your question.
Based at least in part on what candidates the Shia are offering, are you concerned about possible influence that Iran might have on the Iraqi government after the election?
My personal view, and this is political, but I'm there every day, and I'll give you just my personal view. I don't see substantial Iranian influence on this particular government that will be elected in January. I see Iran as more of a longer-term threat to Iraqi security. But that's my view, and I'm a military person who's there.
You mean from a longer view? You're talking about a possible military threat as opposed to political?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, from a strategic perspective, Iraq is a long-term threat to stability. Iran is a long-term threat to stability in Iraq. If you look on the other side, I think Syria is a short-term threat because of the support they provide to the former Ba'athist leaders that we see operating in and out of Syria.
Gentlemen, you talked about how the government is considering alternative solutions in some of those Sunni triangle areas where registration is a problem. As I understand it, one of those is holding elections over a longer period of time, more than one day, in other words. What's your assessment of the security situation in doing that? Doesn't that just give a longer period of time for potential attacks by insurgents? And also, could you tell us what the American role is in security of those election sites?
I do not think the extended election period is still on the table. I know that it was discussed, but I've discussed it with some of the leadership in the Iraqi government. I don't believe it's on the table anymore. At least it wasn't when I left. We are working closely with the Minister of Interior and the Iraqi Election Committee in building the security plan for the elections. It's not finally formed yet. It will be probably by the end of this month. In general, the role of the coalition forces will be one of broad area security, and will be the Iraqi security forces that will work the specifics of the polling areas and places like that.
General, how concerned are you that the Sunnis will not participate or not turn out in numbers sufficient in this election, not only because of the security situation, but simply because of disaffection? And if they do, what does that mean?
Again, I wish my political consultant, John Negroponte, could probably do a better job on this one. My view is, I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is that there will be Sunni participation in this in a reasonable amount. I believe that the insurgents are pursuing a strategy I call purposeful disenfranchisement, by intimidating Sunnis away from the election process, so they can say, well, the Sunnis didn't vote, so therefore the election is invalid. I don't think that's going to be a successful strategy, but it's one that they're trying to implement. So I think there will be sufficient Sunni participation in this for people to accept the fact that it is a reasonably free and fair election.
You talk about the polling places that would largely be Iraqi security forces. There are, what, 9,000 polling places?
They're undetermined, somewhere between 6 and 9. 9's the high end.
And when you look at the number of Iraqi security forces, it seems like there wouldn't be very many Iraqi security forces. If you could talk about that, the numbers at those polling places, and I know you don't want to be too specific on that, but if you'll give us more detail about what the Americans will do. Will they be sort of rapid reaction? What?
Again, we're still working through the process, but I mean, it's like any type of security situation. If you want to guard, you don't guard every place just at the point. You guard it away from the point. You restrict access to it. You keep vehicles from moving in the direction of the polling places around them. I mean, there's a range of options that you do to reduce exposure of these particular sites, rather than just taking 20 or 30 people and huddling around the site itself. That's being worked out. My experience with elections in the past in Bosnia and Kosovo, again, the forces of the coalition of the security forces normally operate away from the polling sites in an area security role and do provide reaction force if there's problems. And the other thing we do and we will do and are doing is to continue to conduct operations prior to the elections to disrupt the insurgents and to keep them from disrupting the election process. So there's an offensive component to this as well.
General, you talk about the progress in security across Iraq. It seems that airport road is a symbol of what many people say is a growing insurgency. What is the story with that road, and why can't U.S. and Iraqi forces patrol it effectively to stop the attacks that are happening on it?
I wouldn't necessarily see it as a symbol of a growing insurgency. I would see it as a symbol of the growing use of car bombs in the insurgency, and that really is the question of the airport road. It's a tactic that's been adopted by the insurgents. They don't have to do much. A car bomb a day in Baghdad or on the airport road sends a symbol that the insurgency is very powerful, when in actuality I don't believe that they are. It's a classic technique of the urban insurgent. They are trying to provoke us to do something that will make us look like we're overreacting to them. I mean, you could tie up traffic. I mean, if you searched every car getting on the airport road, you'd put that part of Baghdad in knots. So it really is the issue of dealing with car bombs. We continually work on that, and you know, we will get to a point where the airport road is secure and our people and the people in the embassy are protected against car bomb. But as with any battle, it's an action, reaction, counteraction cycle that we go through with the enemy, and the enemy does to us.
So is there a plan for that road, or just a broader plan for attacking the terrorists and their ability to make car bombs?
It's a little bit of each, but we're actively working with the Minister of Interior and his traffic forces on ways to reduce the threats to our forces on the airport road. Right behind you, and I'll come back.
Yes, General. It's Drew Brown with Knight Ritter. I know you addressed this in your opening remarks, but in your view, are we winning in Iraq, and how do you define winning? And as a follow-up, do you believe, given the current situation there, that credible national elections will be held, or could be held, or possible to be held by January 30th?
My view of winning is that we are broadly on track to accomplishing our objectives, which is a constitutionally elected government that is representative of all the Iraqi people, and with Iraqi security forces that are capable of maintaining domestic order and denying Iraq as a safe haven for terror. And I believe we will get there by the end of December '05, and I believe we are on track to get there by December of '05. What was the second part?
About the elections, do you think that,
I do.
Given the situation, that credible elections will be held on January 30th?
I do. I mean, it is going to be hard. They will fight us every step of the way. But I do believe credible elections can be held. I mean, again, in the South and in the North, 14 of those 18 provinces, what I believe is that they will be uneventful. They will be contested in the center area of the country. But I believe that we will succeed in that.
As a final question, what do you tell the families of the servicemen who've been killed and maimed over there? How do you define victory in Iraq? Ultimate victory to these people who are losing their loved ones.
I think I just did. But what I'd say to the families was what I said in my opening statement. These soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that have died over there have given their lives to help 25 million Iraqis build a better life and to improve the security of the United States and the coalition. And these young men and women went over there knowing that would be a possibility, and God bless them. That's what makes this country great.
On Syria, could you elaborate a little bit more on the situation up along that border? There was supposed to be a joint border committee that was meeting to work out the cross-border traffic. Has that fallen apart? And would you also address down in the South, it's my understanding you all are still holding some number of Mujahideen al-Khalq at a camp down near Kuwait. What's their status? How many are there? And what's going to finally happen to them, and when?
The last part first, it's more up north. There are, my last recollection, that there is about 3,000 MEK folks still there at a camp. That we are working their process with the Red Cross. I do not have a timeline of when that process will be completed.
So what will happen to them?
Their ultimate disposition, where they.
Where are they going to go?
Yeah, almost every one of them has a different story, so it's a variety of different places. I'm sorry, what was your first?
And the first one is what's going on at the Syrian border. You guys have a committee that was supposed to
There was a meeting. That process is continuing. I would tell you my personal view is the Syrians are making some efforts on the border, but they're not going after the big fish, which is really the people that we're interested in. And we're really interested in them going after the senior Ba'athists that are providing the direction and financing for the insurgency inside Iraq. And that's what we'd really like to see them
You
do.
guys obviously can't cross the border to go after them.
Right.
Yeah, your emphasis on the elections is making them shape into a fairly decisive element of the entire campaign. What would be the consequences if they are successfully disrupted by the insurgents? What's at stake here?
It has been an important intermediate step in our campaign plan since we started this. But it is a step in the process. You're asking me a hypothetical. I don't really know the answer to that. I mean,
Plan for failure.
well, you plan for success, right? I really don't have a good answer to that, and I'd rather not get into a hypothetical situation.
You had said that with the fall of Fallujah for the insurgents, they don't have a safe house inside the country anymore. Mosul, since Fallujah, has seen a lot of trouble up there. What is the status of Mosul now, and do you think that is becoming a safe haven for insurgents? And what are you doing to try to alleviate the kind of ongoing problem up there?
Let me talk about safe haven for a minute, what I mean when I say safe haven. For me, a safe haven is a place where insurgents and terrorists can go and plan and build improvised explosive devices and bring in recruits and receive them in, give them training, link them up with operations, stage for operations, rehearse operations with impunity. And that's what they had in Fallujah. And that's what they don't have anymore. That's what they had in Samara for a while. They don't have that anymore. That's what the Muqtada militia had in Najaf. They don't have that anymore. So they've lost the ability to operate any place with impunity. So what's going on in Mosul, in my view, is not a safe haven. It's an area where insurgents have gone and have had some success against the local security forces. Now, our folks operating with additional Iraqi security forces have restored the status quo, but I will tell you, more work needs to be done there to improve the security situation prior to the elections, and it will be done.
General Case.
I'm sorry, could I just follow up? Do you see at all if that Mosul is becoming a safe haven? Is there an effort at all? Any intelligence that shows that these folks have actually started moving into Mosul and they'll make that kind of their Fallujah?
I see no evidence that the terrorists are trying to make Mosul a safe haven as I define safe haven. It is certainly an area where they are operating and attempting to disrupt the election process and coalition and Iraqi security force operations, but not a safe haven.
General Casey, if indeed, as you say, the terrorists and insurgents have lost the ability to operate with impunity, they've lost their safe havens, and how do you explain the fact that they continue to take such a toll to be so effective against the multinational forces? And what, second question, what, if anything, will the multinational forces be doing differently between now and January 30th to improve the situation and instill confidence in the Iraqi people that they can safely go to the polls and vote?
To be clear, I said that they could operate with impunity inside the safe haven. That they are clearly operating elsewhere around Iraq. Now, the levels of violence since Fallujah have dropped dramatically. And they are actually now down at the levels prior to Ramadan, and really back where we were at transfer sovereignty. So the levels of violence have come way down. They are not necessarily operating effectively against coalition forces. In fact, when we look back, the numbers of attacks don't necessarily produce a very high volume of casualties. In fact, a lot of the attacks are in fact ineffective against coalition forces. They are frankly more successful against civilians, and in some cases against Iraqi security forces.
In the second part of the question, what, if anything, will you be doing differently between now and the end of January to, in spite of all this, instill the confidence to the Iraqi people that they can safely go to the polls and vote?
That's a great question. I think you know, a few weeks ago I asked for some additional forces before the election period. We felt we needed to keep up the momentum, to keep the pressure on the insurgents that moved away from Fallujah after the Fallujah operation took place, and those forces are going to help us both keep the pressure on them and then get a more secure environment prior to the elections. The other thing that's happening now, as I mentioned, the Iraqi security forces are graduating. They're coming out of their training, and we're 18 of those 27 battalions are online, and I think 12 of them have come online in about the last 45 days, and so they are now available to enhance security across Iraq. Police continue to graduate. We continue to crank out police commando battalions. So there will be a concerted effort across Iraq, particularly in the greater Baghdad area, in the Mosul area, and in the Al-Anbar province, all the way up to January 30th.
You said in your opening statement you were generally pleased with their performance. That doesn't sound like a ringing endorsement, though.
I said we are generally pleased with their performance. Everybody knows there have been instances. Mosul is a good example where the police collapsed, but there are 12 provinces where the police are doing very well every day. So it's a mixed bag, but we're generally pleased. The forces in Fallujah, the Iraqi battalions that fought in Fallujah, did very well, and they'll become the center, really, I think, of what the Iraqi army becomes. Eric.
General, the Army Reserve and the Army National Guard have missed their recruiting goals the last 2 months. The National Guard's announced some new incentives for that. Given the fact that the Guard and Reserve represent about 40% of your forces over there and will continue to remain an important part, a source of your troops in the immediate future, how concerned are you that many of these active duty forces who would normally flow into the Reserve and Guard are not doing so because they don't want to have to go back to places like Iraq and Afghanistan? How big a concern is that to you as the commander of forces on the ground there?
Frankly, it's not something I've thought about deeply in about 6 months when I was the vice chief. But clearly, a good flow of active forces into the Guard and Reserve is something that will benefit the Army, the Guard and Reserve over the long haul. And again, I haven't thought about it in a while there, but it's something that I think we need to pay attention to and continue to encourage and maybe incentivize active forces to continue to move into the Guard and Reserve.
Could I ask you a question about the level of sectarian violence? Do you think it's on the rise? There have been several incidents recently, this bombing yesterday against the Shia and bombing of a busload of Kurdish militiamen up in Mosul. How do you assess that aspect of the insurgency?
Yeah. I would not assess that there is a high or seriously increasing level of sectarian violence at this time. There are clearly incidents. It is a troublesome trend, and it is one that we will continue to watch closely.
What do you think the source of it is? Is this, Zarqawi in his famous letter talked about trying to foment just this sort of thing. Do you think that's where these things are?
I wouldn't want to guess on that, but you've quoted a potential source. Go ahead.
General, you said a few times that things are broadly on track, but now that you've been there 6 months, can you give us any specific areas where you had hoped to be further along than you are at this point?
Yeah, fair question. Because the analysis that we did look at that. I tell you, I would have hoped we'd been further along on the Iraqi, helping the Iraqi, particularly the ministries I'm concerned with, Minister of Interior, Minister of Defense, in building Iraq, their intelligence services up. We're working in counterinsurgency. Intelligence is the key to that, and what we've said and what we've seen to some degree, but not the extent that I think we can if we build these effective intelligence services, is that we benefit from what the Iraqis know about themselves, and so that's going to be one of our main priorities for the next year. The second major thing that we'll be working on for next year is the local police. We are continuing to train folks. We've adapted their training program to make them more able to operate in a counterinsurgency environment. I think that the cop on the beat doesn't normally necessarily think he's going to get attacked by a carload of guys. They need to have some paramilitary type skills so they can defend and protect themselves and operate in a counterinsurgency environment. So that's the second point. Third point, I think, is we got to do more work on the borders and on the border guards, and that'll be another focus for the next year.
General, I want to go back to one thing you said about the insurgency, that they're not 10 feet tall. That's a statement that's been used in the past to describe the Soviet Union soldier and the Viet Cong. Yet we had trouble, Vietnam strung out a long time. What is your best intelligence about the resiliency of the insurgency, its ability to reconstitute? I was over there recently, and the frustration was you can cut off a lot of tail, but you got to get at the head. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
should the American public and the Iraqi public expect this insurgency just to go on in some form for quite a while, no matter what happens January 30th?
Oh, I mean, I think we ought to be clear that when they have the elections on the 30th of January, the insurgency is not going to go away. I mean, if you look, you mentioned some other cases, but if you look at the history of insurgencies, these are protracted events. They go on for a long time. Now, they won't necessarily go on at the same level, and they won't necessarily go on at a level where it'll require 150,000 American troops. Especially when we're creating Iraqi security forces that we'll work with over the next year to help them build an independent counterinsurgency capability. But insurgencies generally go on for a long period of time, and I think you'd expect to see the insurgency in Iraq go on at some level for a long time.
It's more sophisticated. I heard that there was command and control improvements, sophistication of attacks seemed to have picked up. It doesn't seem to be getting less sophisticated, but even more as you kill a lot of them.
We are seeing military capabilities. I wouldn't say necessarily sophisticated, but we are seeing military capabilities in platoon-size attacks that we had not necessarily seen before. But for them to conduct an attack like that takes a lot of their time and their effort, and we're not seeing a lot of these. Okay.
Can you just clarify your statement on Syria, what your concerns are about their role in the insurgency or perhaps the going and coming of foreign terrorists across that border?
I have two concerns with Syria. One, as you suggest, is foreign fighters. And we see a facilitation mode through Syria for foreign fighters coming into Iraq. I do not see direct Syrian government involvement in that facilitation, but it is coming through Syria, and I do believe that they have the capability to stop it if they had the will to stop it. The second point is we have fairly good information that there are senior former Ba'athist members of what they call the new regional command operating out of Syria with impunity and providing direction and financing for the insurgency in Iraq, and that needs to stop.
Is Al-Duri one of them?
He's back and forth. He's a back and forther. He's not necessarily in there.
General, is it just a quick?
Let's make this the last one.
Can I do a quick cleanup question on? You said to Kathleen that the Iraqi security forces are performing well in 12 of the provinces, and you also right. But one of the things you also say is that 14 of the provinces are in pretty good shape. So it would seem that in those 12 provinces they haven't really been tested. I presume before Mosul happened, before the most recent violence, you probably thought those Iraqi security forces were performing well. I mean, they're the retrained Iraqi security forces. So if they haven't been tested yet, aren't there still concerns about how they would do? I mean, I guess yesterday in Samara, a police station was attacked and not a shot was fired, and they also left the area.
The 12 and 16 provinces, what I meant, those were policed, not necessarily all Iraqi security forces, just policed. And whether or not they've been tested, some of them have. In the south, during the Muqtada militia attacks, there were several police stations that were attacked fairly heavily, particularly the one in Kut, for example, and they did fight very well. But there is something to what you're saying about untested. Now, in Mosul, we've seen problems with the police in Mosul over a period of time, and so the fact that all of them collapsed at the same time was a surprise. The fact that they had a chief of police who was not very effective and who many believe was corrupt. That problem there had been going on for a longer period of time, so it wasn't a complete shock. Listen, thank you all very much. Come over there and see us.
Are they commanding actually the insurgency, this new regional command?
No, that's their name.
That's what they call themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.